I've got so many Dragon Quest XI questions to get through, there's barely enough time for an intro. Hey everyone, so yesterday I became the first and only person in Australia to play the Dragon Quest XI launch build. So this is the gold code, it's the game that you will get at launch. Now there probably will be a day one patch, there normally is, you know, for performance bug fixes and maybe a couple of additions here or there, but for the most part what I played was the full game. I played for around 4 hours, and there were two different sections I played, basically from the start and then a section further on. All the party members were around level 25, and it was sort of a Sylvando story arc along with a boss in that section. So that's what I'm answering based off. I can answer most of your questions. If you don't get your question answered in this video, it's just because I simply didn't experience it. But let's just kick on, because there's like 33 questions or something like that. So we'll start straight off with Cecil13 from Reddit. How's the hand holding? Do they make you go to sleep every 5 minutes? How many hours till the world opens up? And is it open world? Is there anything stopping you? Okay, so there's a couple of things here. The hand holding is minimal. The first dungeon is sort of like the game's tutorial, and it's not like, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that. It doesn't make you take certain actions or run you through menus or anything like that. It basically just sets you loose in the dungeon to learn how to battle yourself, and you have a party member that you can't control that will use a potion on you if you get low health, or will use a mana item to put your mana back up if you get low on that. So, you know, it's kind of made so you can't fail. You probably could, because, you know, it's still a turn-based battle system, but it makes it very hard to fail. But other than that, there's not really much hand holding. All the other stuff, you know, like if there are game mechanics it wants to explain or wants to elaborate on, it makes it an optional quest. So in the first town of Cobblestone, there was an optional quest that just basically asked you to go and collect something from the roof of a house, and that was just teaching you that you can jump around and pretty much go anywhere to explore the world and you might find things. So that's pretty much, yeah, how that works. There's very little hand holding. It definitely wasn't like a tutorial every 5 minutes that makes you go to sleep. How many hours until the world opens up? I mean, I don't know about the whole world opening up, like world map, because obviously you're going to have to get boats and things like that to travel around the whole map, but you got to a pretty open section, an open field, where there was quite a few ways you could go very early on, like maybe within the first hour, I would say. And I don't know if it's, you know, like really open world. There are really big open field maps, but there still are loading screens like when going into towns and things like that. So it's not like a Xenoblade Chronicles X open world, but it feels pretty large and pretty open. So there's a couple of questions here, one from Zilvari that says, is there a divine bustier? And also, I show love chicken asks, how good is this game's Puff Puff? I thought they were semi-related, so I just hooked them in here. I can't tell you guys because I just didn't experience any of that. So I'm guessing there will be a divine bustier in the game, but I didn't come across it in the 4 hours that I played. And there's definitely going to be some Puff Puff. It is Dragon Quest, but I didn't experience any of it. I only played the opening section, which is mainly focused on the main character itself, the character that you play, and a bit of Eric. And then I played through a Sylvando story arc that was based around a big octopus boss. So yeah, I didn't experience any of that. I can't really comment. And this one from Ecol asks, how are the NPCs in this game? Are they interesting enough to want to explore the town and talk to everyone? And, you know, talking about how each location usually feels different in Dragon Quest games. So in this one, the towns all feel distinct. They feel very different from one another. And to add into that, when you're doing story sections in those towns that are voiced, there appears to be, different accents for each different town. That is what I experienced in my PlayStation anyway. I only really got to go to 3 different towns, but they definitely all felt different, and as far as I could tell, they all had different accents for the voice acting, which, is kind of like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where it tries to really drive home the difference between the regions. So I imagine that it will be very interesting for each town subplot. The NPCs themselves, just, going up and doing random chatter in the town, they all say things that are sort of relevant, at least. So if the town's story arc is to kill a big octopus, all the NPCs seem to, comment around something like that. They'll say, oh, my husband is away and he's on a boat fighting it, or they'll say, oh, you might want to take a cannon with you if you're going to take on that octopus. So they say things that are relevant. Whether that's interesting or not to you is really up to you. Personally, I wouldn't probably talk to every NPC in a town, but it's nice that they at least say things that are relevant instead of just, like going the Pokemon route and then just saying nonsense. So a bunch of people asked this, a couple of them here, DQ Slime, Son of Erdrick, Office Gossip. They wanted to know about the difficulty and the mechanics, whether you needed to use strategy. The difficulty was, I would say, spot on. As I talked about earlier, the first dungeon is sort of a tutorial, so it's obviously not very hard, but it's just trying to teach you the basics of the mechanics. But once you get out into the world, it's just pretty good. You don't want to be taking on enemy after enemy after enemy without healing or using strategy and that kind of thing, because you will die. The section that I played when all my characters were in the level 25s against the boss, that boss was very difficult. Now, it may have been because that's the first section I played and it was the first time I'd ever touched the game, so I was still, learning it, basically, so it might have been that, but it did seem like the boss required strategy. I had to switch out party members, I had to use certain abilities, and I definitely had to heal. So I think the difficulty be pretty spot on, and there are hard mode options in the game, but I cannot talk about them. I wasn't supposed to see them, but there are hard mode options that should make it more difficult if the base difficulty is not for you. Imp Zone asks, how does the music hold up? I thought it was pretty good. I know that some people are really disappointed that it's a MIDI soundtrack, like, people really want an orchestrated soundtrack, but it really wasn't bad. It didn't feel out of place. I actually sort of only remembered that it was a MIDI soundtrack about halfway through the playthrough, so it didn't sound alien or bad or anything like that. It wasn't something I immediately noticed and thought, wow, this music should be orchestral. Like, it just sounded like a game soundtrack. There were a couple of tracks that were pretty good, but overall, I'd say it holds up just fine. Geomancing the Stone. How is the slime population in the game? Are there enough metal slime for me to play with? Well, I only saw metal slime because I only played really early on. I saw some metal slime, but it was in a section of the game where you're running away from a big dinosaur, and so they were actually running away as well. You didn't actually get to fight them. There were plenty of slimes. In fact, the first monsters that you fight are slimes, so I imagine there will be plenty of metal slime around, because it seemed like there were a lot in that runaway section. Ferraku, how interesting is the story so far? Are the characters likable? The story went from, low stakes stuff, complete this, to, the high stakes, sort of like the end game, or sort of, like progressing the meat of the story really quickly. It moved from 0 to 100 pretty fast and got straight into it. And I thought it was reasonably interesting. I mean, I don't think it's gonna blow anyone away, at least not from the start anyway, from what I played. The Sylvando story arc was fun. It was pretty good. So I think that the story should be interesting. I definitely want to play more. So that's something. I do want to see more of the story because it intrigued me. So I imagine it'll hopefully continue to be interesting. And are the characters likable? This has actually been a thing for me in Dragon Quest games where the characters are boring and totally not memorable at all. It's my biggest problem with Dragon Quest games. There's never like a character I get attached to, which is a huge part of gaming for me. But I can thankfully say that I actually like 2 of the characters already. So I really like Sylvando, and I started to like Eric, but I only got to saw a little bit of Eric, and as for the other characters, I didn't actually get to experience them outside of battle, so I didn't get to see them in cutscenes or their story arcs, but they definitely have the potential to be very likable, since I already like 2 of the characters, which is something that I can't say for any other Dragon Quest game. Gaijin B, I know this was not possible in the Japanese version, but can you change what character is displayed outside of battle? No, I did go through the options, but from my experience you cannot change that. You always play as the main character, which is you. Mutamba, odd question, and I guess the answer is no, but can you change the names of the party members? Outside of your own name, so the main character, you cannot change party members. So you can set your name to be whatever you like at the start of the game, but the party members are all set. They're all set characters, all set names. Magus80, how's resources management? I mean, MP for spells, healing items, gold. Do you feel compelled to be efficient with those resources? From what I experienced, yes. In the boss battle, the big octopus boss battle with Sylvando, that was tricky. Like, resources definitely had to be managed. I had to heal a lot, and there was a powerful ability that I found with Jade that did a lot of damage, but I ran out of mana really quickly when using that, so it definitely seems like it will be something you'll have to play around. You will have to manage your resources. As far as gold go, I mean, I didn't have much experience with that. I don't really want to comment because I can't really comment. Healing items, yeah, you're gonna have to manage those because I used up almost all of them on all the characters in the first attempt at the boss fight that I had. Ko Nurasaka, how many party members were you able to recruit in your time playing? When playing from the start, I got up to basically just recruiting 1. I got up to recruiting Eric, so the main character and Eric. And in the other section, the Sylvando section, I had all the characters from their specially prepared save file already, or at least I think they were all of them. I had 8 characters, I think. So I think I had all of them. Was the start of the game slow or fairly fast? I think I talked about this earlier. It moves along pretty quickly. The story progresses quickly, and so does the sort of like tutorial section, I guess you could call it. It moves along pretty quickly. Thoughts on the overworld exploration and dungeon design? I didn't get to do a lot of exploring, unfortunately. I did get to go on a boat for a little bit, which I can't show you because I'm only allowed to show the boss fight from this section. But, you know, I didn't get to go very many places. I basically just got to go from one place to the boss fight. The dungeon design, again, I didn't get to experience that many of them, but it seemed pretty good. Like, there were a couple of little puzzles and traversing segments. And yeah, the enemies were nicely spread out. It just seemed fine. And I really like the part where, you know, after you finish the dungeon, generally you'll beat a boss and then it will just teleport you back to the start when you go to leave. You don't have to go all the way back through the dungeon. So it probably gives them a bit more freedom to make the dungeon more intricate or complicated, since you don't have to run all the way back through. Asamoya, how is the level up progression system, and do you gain stats with each level, or is there some kind of skill tree progression system? I don't know how deep it is, but there is a sort of skill tree system there. I didn't really get to play around with it because when I was playing from the start of the game, I don't think I had access to it at that point. It must come later on. And obviously when I was playing with the pre-prepared save file that they had there when all the party was level 25, I basically only got to walk around the town and then go and fight the boss. So I didn't get to play around with it, but it seems like there is some sort of skill tree system there. You do gain stats with each level, as far as I remember, as far as I experienced, that's what happened. And yeah, I mean, it seems kind of like a standard JRPG leveling system and progression system. It seems reasonably good. And is there any kind of gear progression or crafting? I didn't get to see any crafting things. I didn't have access to it. I had access to some vendors, you know, that sold weapons and armor and that kind of thing. So it felt like you could, you know, progress up in gear, obviously, but I don't know if there is crafting or not. I didn't experience it. Angan Infinity asks a bunch of questions here. Most of it I actually can't answer. I didn't have access to the crafting system in the sections that I played. I have played other Dragon Quests. I've played like 5 of them, but they're not very memorable to me at all, and that's always been my problem with Dragon Quest. So I wouldn't want to try and compare it to any other one. but I can talk about frame rate. There were no slowdowns at all. It performed flawlessly. I was playing on a PlayStation 4 Pro, so I can't comment on like PC or regular PS4. That was just what was available to me there. And it played really good. There were no slowdowns or stuttering or anything that I could see. It was perfectly smooth and looked great to boot. I can also comment on the voice acting because Diego Torres also asked about the voice acting, and it was pretty good. Like, all of the performances ranged from okay to pretty good for me, so overall it was good. Each town or each locale sort of has its own accent as far as I could see, and yeah, some of them might be more annoying than others to some people, but there's a big variety, and it certainly doesn't seem like the quality of the voice acting is bad. You know, it's definitely nobody's phoning it in. There's no, they all seem like professionals, and they all seem to be getting across the emotions and delivery of the lines pretty good. Kevlar, there is hope that the Western release may get the orchestral version of the music. No, I don't think so. The game I played had the MIDI soundtrack, but it wasn't bad. I don't know why there seems to be such negativity around the MIDI soundtrack. It sounds just fine. It's definitely not something that stands out. It's not something you immediately notice as being bad or worse. It sounds like a good game soundtrack, but yeah, it's not orchestral. Temikuz, what are the reasons behind the name changes of the main cast and mostly all other story-related characters? I don't know. I didn't know they were changed. It's not something that I noticed because I wasn't following the Japanese version of the game, but if name changes have occurred, they would have just occurred in localization, which is very common practice. It's quite normal for a character's name to change between the Japanese version and the English version, because in the Japanese version they're using Japanese names, and in the English version they will use more common English names. But it's not something that I felt was off. I wouldn't have even known if I didn't read this question. And I liked all the characters' names as far as I could tell. They all seemed pretty fitting. And if possible, are the party members that I have on the sidelines getting XP too, or only active party members? I can't 100% confirm this. I did try and see this, but just the way that I was playing the game and the sections that I had access to, I couldn't really confirm. But it did seem as if you were getting XP for all party members, including the ones that aren't active. And you can also change party members during battle at any time. So there is that to get everyone XP if you want to go that route, if they don't get them on the sidelines. But it seemed like they did. The Blue Hair Lord, are you free to choose any weapon, and are there good early grinding spots? I can't comment on grind spots. I didn't have the time to run around and try and find a place to grind in such a limited time frame. But you do get access to a wide open field with a couple of places to go really early on, like an hour in. So I'm sure you'll be able to find a good grind spot there pretty early on. There were plenty of enemies around. And the weapons, so not any weapon, but there are definitely choices between weapons. So from what I could experience, at least on the main character, you know, he could use a sword and shield, or he could use a two-handed sword, and there were other characters that could use whips or throwing weapons, you know, so there seems like there's a variety, but I don't think any character can use any weapon. Grand Lethal, how do the controllable characters differ from one another? Do any of them feature unique battle mechanics that reflect their class? I mean, they don't feel super different because, you know, all of them can attack, and some of them have magic spell crossover, you know, like multiple characters can use frizz and things like that. But there were character-specific abilities. I think there was some crossover with the abilities, like Sylvando and the main character, the character that you play, could use, they could both use the same sword ability, but then all their other ones were different. And as far as I could tell, there was lots of unique abilities to each class. Sylvando is sort of, I'm guessing he's a bard character. Like, I only got to experience him in one battle, but I'm guessing he's kind of a bard character. In his abilities, he could use them to deal damage, or he could actually heal your party with a song. So it does seem like they do have some distinctive features about them. Pruhanha, is the game accessible? Talking about Golden Sun, which is not too hard, not too easy. I think the base difficulty, which is, if you just start a new game with none of the hard mode options on, I think it's sort of right on the money. I thought it was good. I don't think it's going to be too hard or too easy. I think, most people, assuming they've played some couple of JRPGs in their life, are going to be able to progress through it pretty smoothly, and there's always the option to grind levels and things like that if you are having a tough time of it. And if you want a bit more challenge, there are a ton of difficulty options. I can't talk about them though, unfortunately. And now quite a few questions, I've got like 4 of them up on the screen now, basically asking about, is this okay for your first Dragon Quest? Should you buy it if you haven't played any of the other ones? Yeah, Dragon Quests, as far as I know, I haven't played every single one, but as far as I know, they're not like connected in any way. They're, a lot like, random numbered Final Fantasy games. They're all in their own worlds with own characters and that sort of thing. There are repeating aspects, which is the same as Final Fantasy. There's usually always chocobos and there's usually always summons. In Dragon Quest, there's always slimes, and, the inventory systems are generally the same. So there are repeating mechanics, but as far as story goes and gameplay and experience, that sort of thing, you should just be able to jump in. And I think Dragon Quest XI will be a great entry point for the series. It's certainly tentatively the one I've enjoyed the most, but I've only played very limited amounts of this one, so I hope I continue liking it as much as I did in my little preview session. Shiro LP, it already exists, Dragon Quest XI for the DS. Why is this one called Dragon Quest XI 2? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about here. There is a Dragon Quest 9 on the DS, and there is a Dragon Quest 11 on the 3DS, but that's only in Japan. So Dragon Quest 9 has the X and the I around the other way, which was only on the DS, and Dragon Quest XI is on the 3DS and PlayStation 4 in Japan, so on both of them. They're both the same game, they've just got different art styles and engines, but we in the West are only getting the PlayStation version and PC. Jason Walter, how British will everyone's accents be? So it actually seemed like from town to town, the accents changed. Silvando has this sort of like Spanish or Latin accent, and there were some British accents that I experienced, but there were also some Scottish accents, I believe, and there were American accents as well, so there's going to be a wide range of accents as far as I can tell. Not everyone's going to be British. Mark in Austin, how do you plan on approaching this review in light of your previously admitted aversion to Dragon Quest games? Do you think you'll be playing Devil's Advocate? Okay, so I have talked about this before, and I've talked about it a little bit earlier in this Q&A. It's not that I have like an aversion to Dragon Quest games, but I've never loved one. I always like Dragon Quest games, but I've never had an attachment to one. I've never had an attachment to any of the characters. The characters always feel very throwaway to me, very totally not memorable, and the stories sort of feel good at the time, but then they quickly just fade away. Like, I really can remember very little about the Dragon Quest games that I've played. They never stick with me. So it's not as much as though I have an aversion to them, it's just that they're not something that I love. I like the series, I don't love the series. So as far as the review goes, I like to think that when I do a proper review for it, that it will be valuable to other people in my position. People who play these games for the gameplay, which is something that I really like. I love the gameplay in Dragon Quest games, but have never, really got attached to story or characters. As far as this game goes, though, I think it might be the combo breaker. It might be the first Dragon Quest that I end up loving, but I don't want to make that call right now. It has the potential to be from what I've seen so far. But I imagine this review is probably going to be positive based on what I've played at the moment. El Nico, I love the worlds of Dragon Quest games, but I can find them to be a grind to get into it first. How easy did you find it to get immersed? So I have talked about this before. It does move along pretty quickly at the start. You get access to a wider section of the world very early on, and I was, getting into it. I played from the start for roughly 3 hours, and the other section was about an hour. So, within the first 3 hours, I was ready to play more. Kanan, does it still allow you to build up tension and go Super Saiyan mode? Yes. Nikki, how much party character interaction is there? Do the quests feel realistic? So there's lots of party interaction. It's a story-driven game. The characters are all there, meant to be in the party. They don't just join it. So it's not like Octopath, which I don't mind. I actually quite liked the way Octopath went their route of different stories, but this one is definitely, a group story going to this goal. They all have, they might have their own subplots and story arcs and things like that, but it's definitely a group-based story. And the quests feeling realistic, I don't know what you mean by that really. The quests are quests, just like in any JRPG. I didn't get to experience that many of them. I mainly kept to the main quest line to progress as far as I could in the time that I had. But I imagine, they feel just as realistic as any other JRPG, I'd say. Forstall Chemist, how does the new battle system feel? Really good. I really liked the battle system. It's maybe a tad on the slow side. It's not super slow, it's not like loading or anything like that. It's just, there are a lot of different options you can choose. So sometimes they might feel like they're moving at a slower pace than, say, something like Octopath, but you can speed them up. There are lots of options. It's very versatile. So you can actually set your characters to be AI controlled. You can, say, can you be AI controlled and mainly focus on healing and things like that? So you're not having to select their actions every turn, and that can make it move along a lot quicker, and it feels pretty good. You can also change those tactics, so you can change the AI control, so you can make the manual AI, you can change the way that they're controlled auto in battle, and you can also switch characters in battle as well. So there's plenty of flexibility there, and I think that's going to be important to keeping it feeling fresh. And I liked it overall. And does the skill tree include different weapons? I actually don't know anything about the skill tree. I had a quick look at it, but I didn't get to play around with it at all because I didn't get skill points to use it in the section that it was available to me. Nose Kid, is a good bit of the game voice acted? I don't want another Ni no Kuni 2. So it's mostly voice acted. The random NPCs in towns, like as you're just walking around a town and you can click on an NPC and they'll give you like a one-line bit of dialogue, that's not voiced. You have to read that. But all story segments and all cutscenes, as far as I saw, were fully voiced. Everything. Every story section that I saw was fully voiced. I obviously can't comment because I didn't play the entire game, but it seems like a majority of the game is voice acted. Quitch Delvin, here's a Dragon Quest XI question. You said before that you haven't been able to get into Dragon Quest games because while it's got the gameplay you love, the character is always bland and forgettable and the story is average. And this is what I was talking about before in that other question. That's all 100% true, but in Dragon Quest XI it did feel like it was more interesting from the get-go, at least for me. Based on what I've played so far, it's definitely had the potential to be a Dragon Quest I properly get into. I like Dragon Quest games, but this one might be the first one I actually love. Mark Phillips, does the world feel like you could get lost in it? I don't know. I didn't experience enough of it to make a swing at that one way or the other. The world was beautiful. I really liked the look of the world, and traversing it in the limited ways that I did, on horseback to move around the wide field map, that all felt good. The world looks really good, and there does seem to be, like distinctive features to different zones and different towns. So it certainly feels like you could, but I didn't experience enough of it to say whether I could get lost in it or not at this stage. Leanne B asks a bunch of questions. I might have answered some of these before, but we'll go through them. Does the combat have depth or does it remain simple and flat? The combat definitely has depth. As I was talking about earlier, there's a lot of flexibility there, moving characters in and out. They all have abilities and magic, as well as, defend and attack and all the basics. They all feel distinct from one another in one way or another with their different abilities. So yeah, and there was definitely some strategy needed in the boss fight in the Sylvando section. That was a tricky boss fight. It needed strategy. So yeah, I would say that the combat definitely has depth. It definitely has versatility. So it should keep fresh for a majority of the game with any luck. How many playable characters were there? How many can be in your party at a time? I don't know about all the playable characters. I believe I had 8 during the Sylvando section, and you can have 4 active in battle, but you can switch between them in battle at any time. So on one turn, you can sacrifice one of the character's turns to switch in another character from your sidelines. 3, are the side quests engaging? I mean, I didn't do enough of them to really answer that. You know, I only did a couple of them, and because it was early in the game, you know, they were mostly to teach you things about gameplay mechanics. You know, learning how to jump and explore was one of them. You had to collect a thing. So I don't know. There's just nothing I can really comment on, unfortunately. And number 4, I've never touched a Dragon Quest game in my life. Everybody's asked this, and as I was saying before, I think this will be perfectly fine to jump into. I don't think it's going to be too difficult, and I think for most JRPG fans, you're going to feel right at home. Elliot Wilderman, is the hard mode really a challenge? I wasn't supposed to see the hard mode options, so I can't comment on them at all, and I obviously wasn't allowed to play with them, so I don't know. From what I mean, very loosely from something I may or may not have seen, it could make the game very difficult. Blade Code, specs for PC. Unfortunately, I just don't know. I asked, they didn't know, the reps that I was there with, because they're not the original developers. They're probably not the ones looking after the PC port either. And from what I played on the PlayStation 4 Pro though, you know, it looked good, but I don't think it's going to be like earth-shattering to your PC or anything like that. I think a mid-range, possibly even low-range gaming PC is going to be able to handle this. And yeah, I don't think they'll be that high. And that wraps up everything. Thanks for sending in all your questions, guys. It was great. Basically I wrote down a bunch of notes from your questions when I went in for the playthrough, just so I could have it there reference to make sure that I was checking all the things you guys were asking for. I hope that I was able to answer everything like satisfactorily. Obviously, you know, I can't really comment on things that I didn't experience myself. I did only get to play, you know, that sort of 4 hours. So yeah. If I didn't answer your question, it's just because it was probably already asked, or I didn't think I could cover it, or it was just silly. But if I did miss your question and you really wanted answered, just pop it down in the comment section here, and I will do my best to reply to it when I get the time, if I can, and I'll let you know if I can't answer it for any particular reason. Other than that, you can check out my impressions video. You know, it's mainly going to be a bit of a simplified retread of some of the answers I gave in here. It's just my initial first impressions on the entire playthrough. I'll also have some unedited gameplay with no voiceover on it, so you can hear the music and just sort of get an idea for the flow of the game. You can check out that as well. I don't know when I will get a review code for this. I don't know when those embargoes will be lifted or anything like that. I just can't wait to dive in and play more, so I will be bringing you the full review as soon as all that gets worked out and as soon as I can. So I'm looking forward to playing more. I hope you guys are looking forward to the game next month. Thanks for liking, subscribing, and sharing, and I'll see you all soon.